They told me to stay silent, to protect the family name. But when I spoke the truth, everything shattered. And only then did I realize freedom was worth the price of losing them all. The engagement hall glowed with warm lights and polished laughter, the kind that hides tension under layers of charm. Maya moved through the crowd, smiling politely, her champagne untouched. Ethan was already drunk, his laughter too loud, his eyes too sharp. Their father brushed it off as excitement, but Maya knew that look. Restless, dangerous. When she caught him cornering her best friend Lily near the bar, her stomach turned. Something in his posture wasn't brotherly. Something was wrong, and everyone else was pretending not to see it, like always. Lily's face was pale, her hands clutching her drink as Ethan leaned closer. Maya's pulse quickened. She crossed the room, her heels clicking too loud against the marble. By the time she reached them, Ethan had grabbed Lily's wrist, his words slurred but sharp. Maya shoved him back, fury replacing fear. "She said no," she hissed, but he just smirked, swaying slightly, eyes full of something ugly. The music kept playing, masking the struggle, the crowd oblivious, or unwilling to interfere. It was a family event, and family didn't cause scenes. When Ethan raised his voice, their father appeared in an instant, like he'd been watching all along. He didn't look at Lily. He looked at Maya. His hand clamped around her arm, hard enough to bruise, dragging her aside before anyone noticed. "Not here," he whispered sharply. "We handle family matters privately." His words burned worse than the grip on her skin. She looked back. Ethan was smirking, adjusting his shirt, already forgiven. Lily was shaking, speechless, and no one would believe her if she spoke. Maya could feel the silence closing in around them like a wall. Her father's face was stone. "You don't embarrass this family," he said quietly, his voice flat and final. Maya's protest died in her throat. This wasn't the first time he'd said those words, but it was the first time they felt like a threat. Ethan stumbled toward them, muttering apologies, but the smugness in his eyes betrayed him. Their mother appeared briefly, her expression tight, whispering something about guests and appearances. The party continued, laughter echoing from the other room, indifferent to the damage in its midst. Later, Maya found Lily outside, crying by the fountain. Her mascara streaked down her face. "I'm sorry," Maya whispered, her voice shaking. "I tried to stop him." But Lily couldn't meet her eyes. The wound wasn't just what Ethan had done, it was the silence that followed, the weight of complicity pressing down from every direction. Maya wanted to promise it would be okay, but even she didn't believe it. Inside, she could hear her father's voice, calm and commanding, telling the staff to keep the family together. As the night dragged on, the air thickened with forced celebration. Guests laughed, toasts were made, and Ethan played the charming brother again. No one noticed the tension between his smirk and Maya's stare. Every cheer for his engagement sounded like mockery. Maya's chest burned with helpless rage. When she tried to leave early, her father's hand landed on her shoulder again. "We'll talk about this at home," he said softly, almost kindly. But the kindness was hollow. It always had been. On the drive home, Maya stared out the window, the city lights blurring into streaks. Lily had refused to stay the night, too shaken to even look at Ethan. Her mother rode in silence, her lips pressed tight, her eyes fixed on her lap. Her father hummed to the radio like nothing had happened. Every minute in that car felt like a performance, a family pretending to be whole while its core rotted from the inside. Maya wondered how long it had been that way, maybe forever. When they reached home, her father poured himself another drink, the sound of ice clinking too calmly for what had just happened. "You need to learn to control your emotions," he said, not looking up. "Ethan's made mistakes, but we'll handle it." Maya wanted to scream, to tell him what he'd just defended wasn't a mistake. It was a crime. But she knew what would happen if she did. The walls would close in, her mother would cry, and her father would win, like always. That night she lay awake, listening to the faint sound of Ethan laughing downstairs with their father. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lily's terrified face. The guilt was suffocating. She should have done more, said more, fought harder. But even as she replayed it all, a darker thought crept in. This wasn't the first time Ethan had gotten away with something like this. It was just the first time Maya had seen it happen to someone she loved. When morning came, her father knocked on her door, his tone calm and measured. "We'll move past this," he said. "Family first." Maya nodded numbly, but inside something had shifted. The house no longer felt like home. Her father's rules no longer felt like law. She looked at Ethan across the breakfast table, and for the first time, she didn't see her brother. She saw the man their father had raised him to be, and she knew something inside her was beginning to break. The morning sunlight felt heavy, as if the house itself resented the brightness. Maya sat at the kitchen table, her untouched coffee cooling beside her. Her father's phone buzzed nonstop, calls from lawyers, the event manager, even the police. He dismissed each one with a calm authority that felt rehearsed. "It's handled," he said once, looking straight at her as though daring her to ask what that meant. When she finally did, his answer was simple. "You don't need to worry about things you don't understand." The words landed like chains. Later that day, Maya drove to the event hall, desperate to understand what had happened to the footage she'd seen being recorded. The manager greeted her with forced politeness, avoiding her gaze. "Your father already came by," he said, voice low, hands fidgeting. "He took care of everything." The phrase chilled her. When she asked to see the security tapes, the man's hesitation said more than his words. "The files were deleted," he muttered. "Corrupted somehow." But Maya noticed the envelope on his desk, thick, sealed, and clearly not part of company paperwork. By evening, Lily's parents called. Their daughter had filed a report. Maya felt both relief and dread. Relief that someone was standing up, dread because she knew what her father would do next. She tried to convince Lily to wait, to give her time to talk to her family, but Lily's voice broke over the phone. "He cornered me," she said. "I won't let him do this to someone else." Maya had no reply. Her loyalty had always been torn between truth and family. But that night, it began to tear her apart completely. When she returned home, her father was waiting in his study, drink in hand, the air thick with cigar smoke. "You spoke to her," he said, not as a question, but an accusation. His tone was calm, too calm. "You'll tell her to retract the statement." Maya froze. "She's your friend, isn't she?" he continued, swirling the glass in his hand. "You can make her see reason." The word reason twisted in her stomach. She realized then he didn't believe Ethan had done anything wrong. To him, the problem wasn't the assault. It was the exposure. Her mother appeared in the doorway, pale and trembling. "Let's just keep the peace," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Ethan just needs help. He's been under pressure." Maya turned toward her, stunned. Pressure didn't excuse cruelty, didn't erase what he'd done, but her mother wouldn't meet her eyes, and Maya understood. It wasn't fear of Ethan that silenced her. It was fear of her husband. The family had been built on secrets, and her mother had learned to survive by keeping them buried. That night, the house was quiet except for the faint sound of her father on the phone in the study. His voice was low but firm, every sentence layered with menace. "She's emotional," he said to someone. "She'll calm down if she knows what's good for her." Maya's heart pounded. She knew he wasn't talking about Lily. He was talking about her. The walls seemed to close in, suffocating her. She realized her father's power didn't come from strength, but from control. He could make anyone feel small enough to disappear. In the morning, Ethan came down to breakfast, as if nothing had happened. His smile was practiced, his tone casual. "Rough night, huh?" he said, pouring himself juice. Maya's hand trembled as she held her cup. Her father watched them from across the table, eyes calculating, ensuring the scene remained picture-perfect. For a moment, Maya wondered if anyone outside their walls would ever believe what this family really was. A family that smiled for the world while bleeding behind closed doors. The news came later that afternoon. Lily's report had been dismissed due to insufficient evidence. Maya stared at the message on her phone, numb. It was too clean, too quick, too deliberate. Her father's shadow stretched across every detail. She called Lily, but her friend didn't answer. When she went to her house, Lily's mother opened the door, eyes red from crying. "We're not pressing it further," she said softly. "Your father called. He said it's better for everyone." The door closed before Maya could speak. That night, Maya tore through the house, searching for something, anything, that could prove what had happened. But her father's office was spotless, the cameras wiped, the files gone. Only one thing remained, a torn piece of paper in the trash with the hall manager's signature at the bottom and a large amount written beside it. Evidence of silence. Maya held it in her hand, shaking. She realized she wasn't fighting just Ethan anymore. She was fighting the family name, the empire built on lies her father would kill to protect. As midnight approached, Maya sat in her room staring at her reflection. Her hands were steady now. The fear had burned away, leaving something colder: resolve. Her father believed the truth could be erased, but Maya knew something he didn't. Guilt doesn't vanish when you bury it. It festers, it waits, it demands to be seen. And for the first time, she decided she would no longer protect them. She would expose them all, no matter the cost. Maya sat across from her parents at the long mahogany dining table, the same table where birthdays were celebrated, deals were sealed, and lies were served with dessert. Her father's tone was steady, almost gentle, as if discussing something trivial. "Maya," he began, "this family has always stood together. No matter what." Her mother's hands trembled as she refilled his glass. "Your brother made a mistake," she murmured. "We can't let one night destroy everything your father's built." Maya's stomach twisted. "A mistake?" That word hung in the air like poison. "He attacked her," she said quietly, voice breaking. "He didn't just make a mistake, Enough!" Her father's voice snapped through the room like a whip. "We don't air our dirty laundry in public, especially not for outsiders." She stared at him, disbelief turning into fury. "Lily isn't an outsider. She's my best friend. She trusted me." "Then you should have chosen better friends," he said, his eyes hard and cold. "Ones who know when to keep quiet." The silence that followed was suffocating. Her mother tried to bridge the chasm with her usual softness. "We just need time to fix this. If you go against the family, Maya, you'll ruin your brother's life. And yours." Her father leaned back in his chair, watching her reaction. "If you speak to the police again, or that girl's parents, I'll cut you off. Financially, professionally. You won't get a cent or a reference from me. Think carefully before you destroy your future over sentiment." Maya's throat tightened. "So that's it? You buy silence and call it loyalty?" He smiled faintly. "That's how the world works, sweetheart. You'll understand one day." But it was Ethan's voice that broke her completely. From the doorway, he leaned against the frame, smirking like nothing had happened. "You'll understand one day," he echoed, mocking their father's words. "We're the same, you and I. You think you're better, but when it comes down to it, you'll protect yourself first." His laughter followed her as she stood and walked away, trembling but determined. In that moment, Maya realized something horrifying. Her brother wasn't ashamed. Her father wasn't angry at him. They were proud. Proud of how easily he could hurt and still smile through it. And her mother? She was too afraid to stop it. That night, as the house fell silent, Maya packed a small bag. She didn't know where she was going yet, but she knew she couldn't stay in a home built on denial. Because if she did, one day she would become like them. The morning Ethan was arrested, the sky was a dull gray. Colorless, heavy, as if the world itself held its breath. Maya watched from her car across the street as the officers led him out in handcuffs. For a brief, fleeting moment, she thought she'd feel relief. But as Ethan turned his head and met her eyes, that familiar grin, defiant and venomous, told her this wasn't over. Inside the house, chaos erupted like a storm. Her mother's voice cracked with disbelief. Her father's rage shook the walls, and Maya's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Missed calls, messages filled with words like traitor, disgrace, murderer. When she finally walked through the front door, the silence that greeted her was more terrifying than the noise. Her father stood by the fireplace, the flames dancing across his face. "You did this," he said softly, almost calmly. "You destroyed this family." Maya's hands shook, but she didn't look away. "I did what you wouldn't. He hurt someone. He's done it before, and he would have done it again." He stepped closer, the smell of smoke and cologne sharp in the air. "You killed your own blood," he whispered, each word deliberate. "Do you even understand what that means? You've chosen strangers over your own flesh." Tears burned her eyes, but her voice stayed steady. "No, I chose what was right." Her mother tried to speak, but her father raised a hand to silence her. "You think the police will protect you? You think truth makes you strong?" He leaned in closer, eyes cold and sharp. "You're naive, Maya. We built this family on loyalty. You just tore it apart." She looked around the room. The same walls that once held laughter now echoed with resentment. The family portraits, perfectly arranged, seemed like lies frozen in time. Her mother reached for her hand, but her father's glare stopped her halfway. When Maya turned to leave, he called after her, voice like a curse. "Don't come back. You're not my daughter anymore. From this day on, you don't exist to us." Her breath caught, but she didn't stop walking. Outside, the air felt colder than before, the world quieter, as if mourning something lost. She told herself she'd done the right thing, that she'd freed herself. But somewhere deep inside, a crack had formed, and it spread with every step she took away from the only family she'd ever known. Behind her, through the window, she could still see her father's silhouette, motionless, staring after her. And for the first time, she realized he didn't see her as his daughter anymore. He saw her as his enemy. The courtroom felt colder than any winter Maya had ever known. The air was thick with tension, heavy with whispered gossip and the clicking of pens. As she sat behind the prosecution's table, her palms damp against the folder in her lap, she could feel every eye in the room on her. Her brother sat just a few feet away, dressed in a suit that didn't belong to him, smirking like this was all a show he'd already rehearsed. When her father took the stand, Maya's stomach twisted. He raised his right hand, swore to tell the truth, and then effortlessly began to weave lies, smooth, practiced, and deliberate. Each false word landed like a blade. He claimed Ethan had been provoked, that the victim exaggerated, that Maya was unstable and held personal grudges. Every sentence painted her as the villain. Every glance he cast toward her was full of disgust. Maya tried to keep her composure, but her hands trembled. The prosecutor whispered reassurance, but it sounded far away. All she could see was her father, the man who once carried her on his shoulders, now tearing apart her credibility to protect the son who destroyed everything. And beside him, her mother sat, eyes red but lips sealed, complicit in silence. When it was Maya's turn to testify, the room went still. Her voice wavered at first, but then steadied as she described the night of the wedding. The screams, the confusion, the fear in her friend's eyes. She spoke about the deleted footage, the hush money, the threats. Her father wouldn't meet her gaze, but she could feel his hatred from across the room, burning like a warning. As the trial dragged on, every day felt like an endurance test. Ethan's defense team painted him as misunderstood, broken, a product of pressure. They showed old photos of him as a smiling child, tried to remind the jury of innocence long gone. Maya could almost believe it herself, until she remembered the bruises, the laughter that followed every cruel act, the smirk when he said, "We're the same." Then came the turning point. A flash drive recovered from a backup security system, one her father thought he'd destroyed. It showed Ethan cornering Maya's friend, the horror frozen in a few undeniable seconds. Gasps filled the courtroom. Maya's mother buried her face in her hands, and for the first time, her father's mask cracked. Ethan's smirk vanished as the verdict was read. Guilty. The word echoed like a hammer striking stone. The judge's voice was steady, but every syllable felt final. 10 years, no parole. Her father stood furious, shouting about corruption, betrayal, family. Security restrained him as he screamed her name. Maya sat frozen as Ethan was led away, his expression empty. No remorse, no understanding, just hollow rage. Her mother wept quietly in the back row, unable to look at her. For a moment, Maya almost pitied them, but the feeling passed as quickly as it came. When it was all over, the courtroom emptied slowly, leaving her in silence. The justice she had fought for felt like ashes, heavy, bitter, and cold. She walked outside into the sunlight, expecting warmth but finding none. Freedom came with a price, and she had paid it in full. Yet somewhere deep down, she knew this was not the end. Not while her father still breathed, and her brother's shadow lingered just beyond the prison walls. The apartment was small, quiet, and painfully clean. Too clean for someone who used to live in a house filled with noise and warmth. Maya kept the lights dim, the curtains drawn. Silence was her only comfort now. Months had passed since the trial, yet the echoes of that courtroom still haunted her. Every morning, she'd wake before sunrise, half expecting to hear her father's voice through the door, ready to drag her back into the chaos she'd escaped. But there was only stillness, only the dull hum of her own isolation. Her mother's letters came regularly, written in the same careful cursive she remembered from school notes and grocery lists. Each one began the same way. "My dear Maya, can we please start over?" Sometimes they smelled faintly of her childhood home, of cinnamon and old perfume, but the scent only made Maya's stomach twist. She couldn't bring herself to reply. Forgiveness, she decided, wasn't something that could be begged for on paper. It had to be earned. And no one in her family had even tried. Still, she kept the letters. Stacked neatly in a drawer she never opened, they became a quiet monument to everything she'd lost. Some nights she'd stare at the drawer, wondering if her mother wrote them willingly or if her father dictated each word. The thought made her shiver. His silence since the sentencing spoke louder than any threat could. It was a silence that promised resentment, something cold and waiting. Work had become her distraction. She threw herself into long hours, empty tasks, meaningless routines. Her coworkers admired her discipline, never guessing that it was really fear. Fear of slowing down, of letting her mind wander to the memories she tried to bury. Whenever she closed her eyes too long, she'd see Ethan's face again, the smirk he wore even as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. His voice followed her everywhere. We're the same. At first, she dismissed it as guilt, a phantom thought left by trauma. But as weeks turned into months, the words took on a life of their own. Sometimes she'd hear them in her own voice, echoing from the back of her mind. Sometimes she'd catch herself saying them aloud without realizing it. She started checking her locks twice, sometimes 3 times before bed. Each night felt like waiting for something unseen to arrive. Sleep didn't come easy. When it did, it was restless, filled with flashes of her brother's laughter, her father's disappointment, her mother's shaking hands. She'd wake with the sheets twisted, her chest tight, unsure if she had screamed in her sleep. The city noises outside were a cruel comfort. Sirens, engines, footsteps, all proof that the world was still turning, even if hers had stopped. Then one morning, she found a note slipped under her door. No envelope, no name, just 3 words written in sharp black ink. He remembers you. The handwriting wasn't familiar, but the message was clear. Her blood went cold. She tried to tell herself it was a prank, a coincidence. But the old dread crept back into her chest, whispering the truth she didn't want to face. That night, she sat awake with every light on, waiting for a knock that never came. Her reflection in the dark window seemed almost like someone else. Someone watching, someone waiting. She pressed her hand against the glass, feeling the faint pulse beneath her skin. For a fleeting second, she thought she saw a shadow move behind her. Days passed without another message, but the tension never left. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart stopped. Every unknown number became a possibility. Him, her father, someone sent to remind her of unfinished business. Maya stopped going out after sunset. The quiet that once comforted her now felt alive, whispering, breathing. Even as she tried to convince herself that the past was gone, she knew better. Some wounds never healed. They only learned to hide. And deep down, beneath all her fear, one thought refused to fade. Maybe Ethan was right all along. Maybe the darkness they shared wasn't just his anymore. The call came just after midnight, the kind of hour when bad news always arrives. Maya was half asleep, tangled in her blanket, when her phone began to buzz on the nightstand. The number was unfamiliar, but something deep in her chest knew who it was before she answered. The officer's voice was steady, almost detached, as he explained that her father had been taken into custody for assault. Her mother was at St. Vincent's Hospital in stable condition. The words echoed through the static, sounding both distant and too close at once. For a long moment, she couldn't move. The phone slipped from her hand, hitting the floor with a dull thud. All those months of silence, of waiting for something to happen. And now it had. She'd imagined this call before, in flashes of guilt and anger, but the reality felt heavier, messier. She wasn't sure if she wanted to cry or laugh. Her father, the man who once stood like stone behind every lie, was finally cracking. The empire he ruled through fear and pride was collapsing under its own weight. The hospital lights were harsh, sterile, the air thick with disinfectant and dread. When Maya arrived, she hesitated in the doorway of room 312, clutching the strap of her bag like a lifeline. Her mother looked smaller than she remembered, wrapped in white sheets that swallowed her frame. Bruises marked her arms, faint purple reminders of years spent making excuses for the man who caused them. When her mother opened her eyes and saw Maya, she started to cry. Not loud, just a soft, trembling sound that filled the room. "I told you to stay away," Maya said quietly, her throat tight. It wasn't anger this time. It was exhaustion, the kind that sits deep in the bones. Her mother reached for her hand, fragile and cold. "I know," she whispered. "I thought I could fix him. I thought if I just stayed quiet, he'd change." Her words broke somewhere between apology and realization. Maya didn't pull away, but she didn't hold tighter either. The machines hummed softly beside them, measuring the slow rhythm of breath and heartbeat. For a moment, there was only that sound. Steady, mechanical, indifferent. Then her mother turned her head slightly, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You were right about him. About everything." The words fell like a confession decades overdue. Maya's chest tightened, but she stayed silent. She wanted to feel vindicated, to believe this moment would bring closure. But instead, all she felt was grief. Not for her father, or even her mother, but for the years that had been stolen by fear and denial. The little girl inside her, who once begged to be believed, finally had her proof. And it didn't feel like victory. It felt like loss. Later that night, as she stood by the hospital window, she saw her reflection in the glass. Pale, tired, and older somehow. Outside, rain streaked the city lights into soft blurs. She thought about Ethan, locked away somewhere, and her father, now caged too. The men who once ruled her life were both behind bars, yet their shadows still clung to her. Freedom, she realized, wasn't just about leaving. It was about unlearning the fear they'd built inside her. Her mother stirred in her sleep, murmuring something Maya couldn't catch. She pulled the blanket higher around her, tucking it gently beneath her chin. For the first time in a long while, she saw her mother not as an accomplice, but as another survivor. Broken, yes, but trying to rebuild. As she walked out of the room, the nurse nodded at her, a silent gesture of understanding. Maya didn't look back. Somewhere in that sterile corridor, between the buzz of fluorescent lights and the echo of her footsteps, she realized this wasn't the end of the story. It was the start of something else, a reckoning that was still unfolding, piece by piece. And as the elevator doors closed, she thought she heard her father's voice again. Not in her ears, but deep in her mind, low and seething. It wasn't real, she told herself. But the chill that ran down her spine told her some ghosts don't stay locked away, even when the cell door does. The air in her father's old office felt different. Heavy, stale, almost suffocating. It had been months since anyone stepped inside. Dust coated the mahogany desk, and the faint scent of cigar smoke still lingered in the curtains, trapped like a ghost. Maya stood in the doorway, hesitant, the keys trembling in her hand. The place had always been forbidden to her growing up, a kingdom of closed drawers and whispered secrets. Now it belonged to her, whether she wanted it or not. She started with the top drawers: contracts, ledgers, tax papers. Ordinary things that hid extraordinary wrongs. But then she found it. A locked box tucked beneath old files. It was heavier than it looked, carved with the family initials. R.W. Robert Whitmore, her father. The key was taped underneath the drawer, just where he used to hide his liquor money. When she turned it, the click of the lock sounded too loud in the quiet room, like a gunshot. Inside were letters, dozens of them, sealed envelopes dated over 10 years. Each marked with initials she didn't recognize. Her pulse quickened as she began opening them one by one. The first few were written to business associates, discussing quiet settlements and avoiding scandal. The language was vague, careful, but the deeper she went, the clearer it became. Her father had spent years covering up Ethan's crimes. Not just one assault, several. Each letter painted a picture of a man who would rather destroy lives than let his family's name stain the headlines. Victims paid off, witnesses threatened, evidence lost, with generous donations to the right people. Maya's hands trembled as she turned the pages. These weren't acts of loyalty or love. They were transactions. Cold, deliberate manipulations meant to protect an image, not a person. She found one letter written in her father's hand, addressed to an attorney. It was dated just after her mother's first hospital visit years ago. "We must keep this contained," it read. "No one outside the family can know what Ethan is capable of. If we lose control of the narrative, everything I've built, everything we stand for, dies with it." Maya reread the line, her stomach twisting. Control. That had always been the word he lived by. In the back of the box, wrapped in an old envelope, was something else. A photograph. Her father standing beside Ethan, shaking hands with a local official. Both smiling. Behind them, Maya recognized her friend, the first girl Ethan hurt. Blurred in the background, her expression unreadable. The caption on the back read, "Family always comes first." Her breath caught. It wasn't loyalty he preached all those years. It was power disguised as protection. Maya sank into the leather chair, clutching the photograph. The realization was suffocating. Her father hadn't saved Ethan out of love. He'd done it to preserve the illusion of control, the family legacy he worshipped more than any of them. He didn't care who was broken, silenced, or bought along the way, as long as the Whitmore name stayed untarnished. She opened another envelope, this one marked with her own initials. M.W. inside was a single page, unsigned but written in her father's handwriting. "You'll understand one day. Blood isn't about love." It's about endurance. The paper slipped from her fingers. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. It was like he was still there, whispering his twisted truths into the air. The sun had started to set outside, the room filling with the dim orange glow of dying light. Maya looked around. The shelves, the trophies, the framed certificates, all monuments to a man who built his success on silence. She gathered the letters into a stack, tied them with a ribbon, and placed them in her bag. She didn't know what she'd do with them yet, but she knew this was only part of a bigger story. One that didn't end with her father's arrest. As she locked the office behind her, she caught her reflection in the glass cabinet. Her eyes hard, her expression unfamiliar. For a fleeting moment, she thought she saw movement behind her reflection, a figure standing where no one should be. She blinked and it was gone. But the chill that crawled up her spine told her one thing for certain. Some legacies don't die easily. They linger, waiting to be claimed or destroyed. The prison walls loomed tall and gray, their coldness cutting through the wind like a warning. Maya hesitated at the gate, clutching the envelope of documents in her hand. She had imagined this moment countless times. What she'd say, how she'd feel. But now, standing in front of the place where her father was locked away, all those rehearsed words vanished. The air smelled of metal and rain. Inside, the sound of doors clanging shut echoed like distant thunder. The guard led her through a long hallway lined with flickering fluorescent lights. Each step felt heavier than the last. When she reached the visitation room, her breath caught. Her father sat across the table, thinner than she remembered. His once commanding posture now slouched, yet his eyes, sharp and unyielding, still burned with the same authority that used to fill their house. He didn't stand. He didn't smile. He just stared at her, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Maya," he said at last, his voice rough, coated with bitterness. "You finally came to see what you've done." The words were meant to wound, but she'd grown immune to them. She sat down, her expression calm, and placed the thick envelope on the table between them. His eyes flickered briefly toward it, then back to her face. "You've been digging," he said. "You always did like playing hero." "I didn't have to dig," she replied softly. "You left everything behind. The letters, the payments, the lies." She pushed the envelope closer. "You destroyed people to protect Ethan. You destroyed Mom. You destroyed me." For the first time, his gaze faltered. His hand twitched as he reached for the papers, his knuckles pale against the metal table. He flipped through the document slowly, his expression tightening with every page. When he reached the photo, the one of him and Ethan smiling beside the blurred figure of Maya's friend, his hand froze, his jaw clenched. The silence between them grew sharp, dangerous. "You think this makes you righteous?" he said finally, voice low, trembling with fury he could barely contain. "You think because you exposed us, you're clean? You carry our blood. You'll end up like us." His eyes lifted to meet hers, and for the first time, there was fear behind them, a quiet recognition that his power was slipping away. Maya leaned forward, her voice steady, deliberate. "No," she said. "I'm what you tried to bury. You built your life on control, but I'm not afraid of you anymore." Her father's lips twisted into a faint smile, the kind that used to freeze her when she was a child. "That's what your brother said once," he murmured. He thought he was different too. But blood doesn't wash off, Maya. It seeps in. She stared at him, the weight of his words pressing against her chest like a hand. For a moment she saw a flicker of something human. Regret, maybe. But it disappeared as quickly as it came, replaced by the same hollow arrogance he'd always worn. His face was older now, lined and tired, but his cruelty hadn't aged a day. As she stood to leave, he called after her. "You'll see, Maya, the world doesn't forgive people like us. It remembers." She didn't turn around. The guard opened the door, and the sound of the lock sliding into place drowned out his voice. Still, his words clung to her like smoke, following her through the corridors, into the open air. Outside, the evening sun bled orange across the sky. Maya stopped at the gate, gripping the fence for balance. She told herself his words were just manipulation, the same poison he'd always used to keep her chained. But deep inside, a small, unshakable fear whispered that maybe he was right. Maybe the darkness wasn't just theirs. Maybe some parts of it lived in her too. She looked down at her hands, the faint tremor in them catching the light. Her father's voice echoed faintly in her head. "You'll end up like us." Maya closed her fist, steadying herself. "No," she whispered to no one. "The cycle ends here." But as she walked away, the reflection in the glass of the security booth seemed to linger a second longer, like it wasn't quite ready to follow. The air outside the prison was heavy with rain, the kind that falls softly yet feels like a cleansing. Maya stood still for a long moment, eyes fixed on the horizon where the gray sky bled into the distant hills. Behind her, the iron doors groaned shut with a final echoing clang. A sound that once might have haunted her. Now it felt like the closing of a chapter that had dragged on too long. She didn't turn around. She didn't need to. The weight that had followed her for years, the guilt, the fear, the invisible leash of her family's name, seemed to dissolve with each step she took away from those walls. Her father's words still echoed faintly in her mind, venomous and sharp. "You'll end up like us." But even that echo was fading now, replaced by something quieter, purer. Her own heartbeat, steady and sure. The family name was ashes. The house, the legacy, the illusion of unity, all gone. But for the first time, Maya didn't feel like she'd lost something. She felt lighter, free. Every lie she'd untangled, every truth she'd spoken, had led her here, to this moment of silence where her past could no longer reach her. As she crossed the parking lot, the first drops of rain kissed her skin. She tilted her head upward, letting them fall over her face. The cold was sharp, almost shocking, but it grounded her. The world hadn't ended. It had just become honest. Maya took a deep breath and whispered, "I didn't kill my blood. I just stopped letting it poison me." And with that, she walked toward the waiting dawn, not as the daughter of her father, not as the shadow of her brother's sins, but as herself. The rain fell harder, washing the dust from her shoes, the memories from her skin. For the first time, her silence wasn't fear. It was peace.